Recovery is a good thing. Recovery, that's the first thing in the first step, dealing effectively with our addiction. But the spiritual awakening, I mean, I'm so amazed and also grateful for the experience that I began having at 4 years of sobriety in 1988. My sobriety date is February of 1984, but I didn't know about the big book and the steps at that time. Oh, I knew about the big book and I was reading it and I was in step studies and book studies. But my sponsor, God bless him, a great sponsor in terms of living life and a sounding board for the beginning of learning about rigorous honesty. Unfortunately, didn't know much about the steps or the big book, so I had to wait until I had an experience hearing a man share at 4 years of sobriety. And that began my journey of awakening. Up till then, I was just thawing out in the rooms. I'm serious. That's my mental image of it. I was captured like at some Neanderthal in an iceberg. And I thawed out in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, going to meetings and talking to my sponsor. I thawed out. It was legitimate. Unfortunately, it was very slow. When I did the steps with this big book mechanic at 4 years of sobriety, I began to thaw out on the inside. I've left this slide up. Hopefully you recognize that's my website, herbk.com. There's a lot of resources there. They're all downloadable for free. They all support this work, especially this year's work in terms of the twice-a-month workshop. In the workshop area on that website, there's what's called a way of life document. My recommendation, because that's my generation, is to download it for hard copy. I like hard copies. Lots of people who are more technically acquainted and competent don't need that. It doesn't matter. It's there. It's a 68-page document. So it's quite significant. It will support you, especially now in this journey as we go through and complete step 3 today, and then continue on with the nitty-gritty of the step work, especially steps 4 through 9. It will be a tremendous hand document for you to follow my articulation, describing my knowledge, as well as sharing of my experience with doing this work of the steps. Also, an additional resource in case you want a broader and deeper unpacking of each of the steps, both knowledge and experience, you can go to my YouTube channel and go to the playlist on the Tuesday night workshop from 2021, and you'll have more than you ever wanted to listen to. So here we are at step 3. Everybody knows it. Well, if you've been around a while and been going to meetings and paying somewhat attention. It's very dense, meaning compact. Made a decision right off the bat. What's that mean? To turn. What's that mean? Our will and our lives. What does that mean? Over to the care of God. What does that mean? As we understood God. Well, at this point, if you were here for the last couple sessions, February and up till now, hopefully you have an answer to that question. Step 2. Although it's not in the step, and it's not that clear in the book as I say it, step 2 is a decision about God. As you understand it, not as I understand it, not as the book understands it, I think it actually would have been more helpful if they'd said, as we don't understand it. God as we don't understand it. Because any God that I understand is too small, because I'm a finite person. So Bill asks us that question in the warm-up to the third step. I believe it's page 60. I'm not going to burden you or me with looking at the big book right now. I'm going to share from my slides my spontaneous knowledge and my experience with step 3. The material in the big book is pages 58 to 63. 58 to 63. 58 to 60 is a warm-up. It contains then the ABCs to recap steps 1, 2, and 3. The sine qua non, that's Latin, without which you cannot proceed. Sine qua non is rigorous honesty. Bill spends the first part of page 58 talking about honesty. It's somewhat misunderstood. Many people ask, well, what does it mean, constitutionally incapable? I believe we handled it last time. It means constitutionally, by my very biological, physiological constitution. I was born that way. It's not my fault. It's my nature. I have no capacity for honesty. That's what he's talking about. I don't mean me, because that's not true for me. I was emotionally and mentally challenged, but not physically, biologically challenged. But what do we mean to turn? What do we mean, will and life? What do we do? These are the questions he asks us. Pay attention to how Bill structures it. He's a phenomenal teacher. At the beginning of step 2 on page 45, he said, where and how will we find this power? Here at the beginning of step 3, he asks, well, what do we mean by that? And what do we do? You see, we're blessed as human beings to have a mind that thinks and knows, and a will that makes decisions to take actions. The two things that make us specifically human. We looked at that in step 1. Powerless, no choice with regard to our addiction and with regard to unmanageability. And yet, in step 2, Bill says we have a choice. In fact, we're invited to make that choice about God. And now in step 3, formally in the step itself, he says, we make a decision. We're invited to make a choice. A decision to turn. From what to what? I'm a nutcase with regard to words, in the sense that I want to be precise. I want to understand them. I want to use them carefully. Bill was a very precise writer in the big book. He chose his words, and quite frankly, the writing of the big book was done by group conscience. So it had the vetting of those people who had early recovery in 1934, 1935, 1936, 1937. The book began to be written in 1938 and was concluded in 1939. But it was written by Bill primarily with the approval and the vetting of the group conscience. I believe that's what makes it so significant. The hand of God. That's my interpretation. It doesn't matter whether you think that way or even accept it. It doesn't matter. It's just my take on it. Made a decision. Oh, it's a choice. My free will, like in step 2, page 53, God is or God isn't. What is your choice? We are confronted with the question of faith. This is another faith decision. but it's a decision that's going to be converted into trust. Because it's going to be a commitment to take action. That's step 3. It's a commitment to take action. There's no action in step 3 other than praying the prayer. And as many of you noted, I will be inviting you to pray the prayer today as a group. In a unique way, at least by my experience. A decision to turn. From what to what? What do we mean by that? Well, step 3 is about alignment. That's what we covered last time. And that's not in the big book, that word, but it really captures, from my standpoint, the suffering is when I'm going against the flow of reality as it manifests. The recovery and the happiness of human beings begins when we are in the flow of reality, in alignment with. I have free will. Reality is manifesting on an evolutionary basis, on a daily basis. It's in the flow. And when I'm in alignment, my life works. And when I am self-will, pages 60 to 62, my life is filled with suffering. Those bedevilments on page 52 described in detail as the underlying cause and condition, pages 60 to 62. Self will run riot, and I can't even reduce it much by wishing or trying on my own power. Bill nails the coffin on page 62. He closes unmanageability, at least in my interpretation, on page 62. We can't even reduce it much by wishing or trying on our own power. In the same way, he closes addiction on page 43. There'll come a time where we have no effective mental defense. So being in alignment is what we mean by turning from our self-centeredness to a relationship with others, to a relationship. It's not in the big book with those words. The words over to the care of God. So many people talk about turning our will and our life over to God. That's not correct. In fact, it's diametrically different than the spirit and the instructions of the big book. We are not turning over to God. That's a very passive connotation. Oh, God will take care of me. Wrong answer from my standpoint. God will not take care of me. I'm turning my will and my life over to the care of God, meaning God will support me. I heard a phrase that just really challenged me probably 2 or 3 years ago. God protects us from nothing and supports us in everything. There's a koan for you to gnaw on for a while in your meditation. What does that mean? It really is the spirit of step 3. Over to the care of God as we understood God. So please remember, let me go back to that. Remember what you made a decision about in step 2. What was your decision? What do you need? What do you want? What's your decision about power? Step 2, page 53, God is or God isn't. What is your choice? Your choice, not the book's choice, not your sponsor's choice, not your religion's choice, your personal choice. And it can change as you do, and will probably if it's authentic. But here we are in step 3. And Bill asks us the second question. The first question is, what do we mean? I believe alignment. There's more to it. Well, what do? We make a decision for a relationship. Okay, Herb, that's not in the big book. Where did you get that word? Well, I get it from the bottom of page 62. Bill suggests that we are the actors and God is the director. We are the agents and God is the principal. We are the child and God is the parent. On the top of page 63 in the first paragraph, God is the employer and I am the employee. In the second paragraph, God is the maker or creator and I am the made or the created. So he doesn't use the term relationship, but he tells us there are 5 models right there in the big book in anticipation of step 3. A decision for a relationship with that which we made a decision about in step 2. Here's the question. I believe I posed it for you to pose to yourself last time we were together 2 weeks ago. What relationship do you yearn for? Wow, what a rich word that is. Not in the big book again, but it comes out of my experience. It comes out of my sort of poetic approach to the spiritual life. What relationship have I yearned for since I was 10 or 12 years old with my very first conscious experience of a power other than myself? I can describe it, I won't. And I have chased that feeling and that yearning all my life. I didn't know that's what I was pursuing. But I had this deep sense that there was something that was missing. And I tried formal religion. As you know, I studied to be a Catholic priest as a monk for 7 years. I left because I didn't find it. I studied psychology because I was going to pursue helping people from that aspect. I didn't find it. I pursued work and money and fame and power. That didn't work. I pursued recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous for 4 years. I wasn't finding, I was seeking, and I thought that was the badge that I could wear. I discovered that I'm a seeker, and that felt like maybe something as the answer to the question. And then I began to unpack these steps in this way over several years with several different teachers and mechanics with the big book. And finally, I came to this step 3 question: what do I yearn for? And I found the answer. For a relationship. I yearn for a relationship with this power. To be in the relationship and in alignment with reality. Step 3 is about alignment. My will in alignment with reality. I won't even use the term God's will because I don't believe that God has willpower. God just is. God doesn't have adjectives. God is just a verb. I'm quoting Chuck C. God is a verb. Love is a verb. God is love. Another series of meditations that would be very fruitful. What did all of that mean that Herb just said? And then the final piece of step 3 and the answer to the question, what do? We have a relationship. We make a decision for a relationship, for power, my relationship with power. Step 3, as I mentioned earlier today, is my commitment to action in prayer. In fact, it's a public commitment. Bill suggests that we pray it with somebody else. Today, we will pray it together as a community. Public witness to our commitment to do steps 4 through 9. Bill says on page 58, willing to go to any length. He defines what that means there. That means we were ready to take certain steps. And what does he mean by that? Steps 4 through 9. 4 through 9 are the program of recovery. Steps 10, 11, and 12 are the program of living. Steps 1 through 9, the program of recovery. The first half of the first step, dealing with the addiction. And Bill says right at the end of the 9th step, the beginning of the 10th step, we enter the world of the spirit, and we are placed in a position of neutrality with regard to our addiction. It's really clear when you connect the pieces and the dots in the big book. Steps 1 through 9 brings us to neutrality with regard to our addiction. And then he raises the yellow flag and he says, but we're not cured. We have a daily reprieve. We're not cured of what is the question? He doesn't say it this clearly. We're not cured of our unmanageability. We have a daily reprieve from our unmanageability. We have a daily reprieve from our spiritual malady. We have a daily reprieve from our cancer of the soul. And we participate in radiation and chemotherapy and surgery in steps 10, 11, and 12. Step 10 being the surgery, step 11 being the radiation, and step 12 being the chemotherapy, if you want to use a model for the cure of cancer. We're talking about now the cure of spiritual cancer. Our self-will run riot, our willfulness, our self-centeredness. Bill says on page 62, this is the root of our problem. Addiction's not the root, it's the fruit. And we'll be looking at fruit of the root when we go into step 4. And I'll talk a little bit about that toward the end of today, my talk today. But step 3 is a decision to have a relationship with power, a relationship based on trust. Maybe you can see at the bottom of the PowerPoint the word keystone. That's the word Bill uses for the step 3, the keystone, for the arch through which we walk to a new freedom. The keystone is at the apex, at the top of the arch that holds the entire structure together. Phenomenal concept. He uses it again at the end of step 5, page 75. We have now walked through the arch to a new freedom. He mentioned the first time the arch on page 47 in step 2. Step 2, the willingness to believe, is the cornerstone. Step 3 is the keystone that holds the entire arch together. And then when we finish our 4th step and 5th step, we walk through the arch to a new freedom. So obviously the building blocks of the arch are the components of step 4. Again, we'll look at that a little bit in overview before we leave today. We're in bondage. The whole point of step 1, powerless. The whole point of step 1, no choice. No choice with regard to our addiction. When I begin, I lose control. When I stop and intend to stop, I can't stay stopped. I'm in bondage of my addiction until I finish step 9. And then I realize that I'm in bondage of unmanageability and I'm not cured. I need to foster this relationship with power. I need to be in alignment with reality. Step 10 is the recognition that I can't do this on a daily basis on my own. On a daily basis, I will be disturbed when they crop up. On a daily basis, on a spot check basis, quoting from the 12 and 12, I need to put myself in alignment and do course correction on a spot check regular basis, on a daily basis. I need to sit in alignment in the morning asking for guidance in step 11 and sit at night in step 11 doing a little inventory of my day to see how I did and how I forgot to do or overlooked doing step 10. And then in step 12, living by principles, helping other people. made a decision to have a relationship and to be in alignment with a caring power. If your decision in step 2 about power doesn't have a connotation of caring, you might want to revisit it, because that's the essence of step 3. Turning our will and our life, our will, our decisions, our life, our actions, our will, that what we want, our life, that's what we get, over to the care of. When I get in the car, my car, I put in my keys, I start my car, I can drive my car, I know where I want to go, I don't know how to get there, so I put the address in the GPS and I listen to the direction. If I listen to the direction, follow the direction, I will get to where I'm going. I have turned my goal of driving my car over to the care of my GPS. It's a fabulous image, which really helps us understand this alchemy of partnership. My willingness and God's grace. Alchemy of partnership. Alchemy turns my self-will into alignment with God's will, as I don't understand any of that. But I do find freedom. Now, if you see the cartoon correctly, there's no walls, there's no ceiling, there's no floor. There's just pathetic Herbie standing there, think he's still in jail until he does his 4th step and finds out that he's holding the bars, and there's no other support except his determination to manage and manipulate reality as it is in front of him or as he sees it. Steps 4 through 9 gives me the freedom. We walk through a spiritual arch through which we walk to a new freedom. Bill didn't give us this design. The person who helps me with my PowerPoints is a very creative artist, and she put together this image of the spiritual arch through which we walk to new freedom. Bill doesn't tell us that the foundation is step 1, but he tells us the cornerstone is step 2, which assumes that we've finished step 1, that we've admitted complete defeat, that we have surrendered or are willing to be surrendered. Hear the vocabulary. I cannot surrender. I cannot admit complete defeat. I cannot concede to my innermost self. And yet I take the actions that are recommended and I pray to be delivered. I pray to be delivered. Hear that. And step 2 is that willingness to believe that there is a power available to me that is deep down inside of me. Page 55 answers those 2 questions on 45 in step 2. Where and how are we going to find that power? Think honestly. Act diligently and consistently. Fearlessly. With this attitude, you cannot fail. Page 55. With this attitude, think honestly, act diligently, fearlessly. You will not fail. Then he takes us to step 3, the keystone, this decision to turn. The cornerstone is the first stone placed on the foundation that sets the direction of the entire arch. Critically important. As important is the stone placed at the top, the apex of the arch that holds the entire structure together. I'm going back that for just a minute. There's a word at the bottom of the right-hand side of that PowerPoint, freedom. This is what Bill promises us at the end of the 9th step, freedom from addiction. And then as we incorporate 10, 11, and 12 in our daily practice, he promises us freedom from our unmanageability, that we have power to manage our lives. A power of alignment with reality, a power of relationship and practicing that relationship in 10, 11, and 12. The assignment was to determine what is your heart's desire for a relationship. What do you yearn for in a relationship? And if you had time to do that, terrific. And if you didn't, then think about it right now, spontaneously. What do you want in relationship to power into the God of your not understanding? What relationship, not just your head and your heart, but your soul and the marrow of your bones? What relationship does your very existence yearn for in relationship to life, in relationship to yourself, in relationship to living your life? And so this is the 3rd step prayer. I call it the prayer of consent. It's the 3rd step prayer, but it's adapted a little bit. I've taken out the these and the thys, made it more current in its language. I'm going to invite you now to pray this prayer together with me. As I mentioned, though, in a different way. I use the word antiphonal, antiphono. In Latin, anti means back and forth. Phonal means sound. In the monastery, when we prayed as monks, the monks on the right-hand side of the chapel began a prayer out loud, sometimes in song, but mostly just prayed out loud. And the monks on the left-hand side of the chapel would respond with the same prayer or with a different prayer. Back and forth, antiphonal. Like a tennis match, back and forth. I'm going to invite you to pray the prayer as I pray it from this slide. You don't need to know it. You don't need to memorize it. You don't need to read it. In fact, I would recommend that you sit quietly, comfortably, and you close your eyes. I'm inviting you to pray out loud. Perhaps the administrator can even unmute us all. I call this antiphonal prayer. When we're in a room all together, we stand in a circle and we hold hands. On Zoom, we're in a circle right now, a circle that includes the globe, and our hearts are connected. Our hands are not necessarily connected at this point, but our hearts are connected. So I would like you to listen to the meditation from the big book. The meditation are the promises. That very first paragraph on page 63. You might want to close your eyes. You certainly want to breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in the spirit and the grace, and breathe out that self-centeredness and the darkness. Breathe in the light and breathe out the defects and the darkness. Quietly and slowly, and breathing in deeply and breathing out rhythmically. On page 63, Bill gives us the promises, at least as I interpret them. When we sincerely took this step, this position, this relationship, So have in mind the decision that you made in step 2, the God of your understanding, the God of your desire, the God of your passion, the God of your need. And have in mind and in your heart the relationship that you hope to build over the next several months as you do steps 4 through 9, building a relationship with the sunlight as you're removing the obstacles, the clouds, the darkness to that sunlight that's in you, that you will name and realize your powerlessness over that darkness, and you will pray to a power other than yourself to remove that darkness, so that in step 9, and by the time you finish step 9, you will have such an effective relationship with that power that you'll be neutralized with regard to your addiction, and that you will live in the sunlight of the Spirit. When we sincerely take this step, all sorts of remarkable things follow. We have a new relationship, a relationship of power. This power provides what we need. Notice, not what we want. This power provides what we need. There are 2 conditions. If we keep close to this power and perform this power's invitation, respond to this power's invitation. What does that mean? I translated as step 11, staying close to this power, and step 12, responding to the invitation of this power to operate on principles, especially helping other people. Being all powerful, God will provide what I need if I do step 11 and I do step 12 on a daily basis. Established on this foundation, we become less and less interested in ourselves. Less and less, hear the dimmer switch, less and less interested in ourselves. More and more, we become interested in seeing what we can contribute to life. Listen to the dimmer switch going up a notch at a time, revealing more light and more light and more light as we live daily in alignment with this relationship. As we feel new power flow in, as we enjoy peace of mind, as we discover we can face life successfully, hear the dimmer switch, came to believe. As we become conscious of God's presence, we begin to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. Or the hereafter, death itself. We are reborn. It took a lot of courage for Bill to put that in the big book. A very potentially religious term. We are reborn, but he had to do it because we're given a new life. We're freed from our addiction, and we're freed from the burden of our unmanageability, and we're able to live life successfully. Our lives will flourish if we live in partnership with this sunlight. Bill suggests that we think about this, which you have been doing. The fact that you have showed up today means that you've already taken the 3rd step by even being here. You've taken the 3rd step. It's a personal decision, a commitment to do the balance of the steps. That's a personal decision. You've taken it already by being here. But he suggests that we do it with somebody else in community as public witness to our decision. That we at last abandon ourselves. Very high standard. I'm willing to be taken to a place that I don't even know exists. Hear that? I'm willing to be taken, to be delivered to a place that I don't even know exists, but I'm willing. Blind faith, courage of commitment. He asks us to voice it without reservation. Of course, I have reservations. I have no real idea of what it means, but I'm going to trust this power, and I'm going to trust this process, and I'm going to trust myself. As finite as I am, I'm sincere. Even though I'm very, very challenged, I'm sincere. I want to be a better person. I want to live a more life based on integrity and principle. I'm going to trust this process. I'm going to trust these steps. I'm going to trust life itself and myself in my relationship to life. When I pray this prayer, antiphonally, again, I will pray a word or a phrase, and then I'll pause. Your mics are all open, so pray in unison in the best way that you can. There's no rush here. I'm going to be very quiet and very measured. But think in terms of what we're doing here. Prayer is not about the words, it's about my intention. My intention is to commit to a process of being delivered. Step 2 is about your decision. What was it? Step 3 is your decision about a relationship. What is it? What is it? What's your intention here in terms of a relationship, this power that you defined in step 2? Please join me. One word, one phrase at a time. I will pray it, pause, and then you pray it out loud if you choose to, or quietly if you choose not to do it out loud, or not at all, but in your intention to commit. Hold that intention as we pray together in community. God, I offer myself to you to build with me and to do with me as you wish. Relieve me of the bondage of self.
Relieve me of bondage of self.
That I may better do your will.
That I may better do your will.
Take away my difficulties.
Take away my
difficulties.
That victory over them may bear witness. To those I would help.
Those I would help.
Of your power. Your love. And your way of life. May I do your will always.
May I do your will always.
Thank you. You can put everybody back on mute for just a minute, please. Thank you. So we've now built the arch. We've created a foundation to the arch. We've conceded defeat. We've made a decision about power. We've made a decision for power. And now we're going to continue. We're going to take a look at resentments in step 4. We're going to take a look at fears in step 4. We're going to continue to look at step 4 and see our inappropriate sexual behavior. This is the step 4 inventory. We're going to look at all our dishonesty and every secret. And in fact, we're going to reveal it in the 5th step. And the promise is freedom. There's more promises at the end of step 5. You can look at those in anticipation as a meditation on page 75. That's part of now the assignment going forward is take a look at the material, pages 63 to 67 in the big book on step 4, resentment inventory. We'll be looking only at resentments this next time that we get together, 2 weeks. Maybe 3 weeks. I don't have my calendar in front, but it's the 2nd Monday of the month. I'll be taking a deep look, deeper than probably most of you have ever gone, in the resentment inventory. Unpacking what's in the big book, but expanding it with my own personal experience with column 3 and column 4 of the resentment inventory. And then eventually we'll be looking at the fear inventory and then moving on to the sex inventory and then bringing it to conclusion. It'll take us more than a month to do this, so I'll spend a couple months on step 4. And I'll explain the method and protocol and the timing of it next time we get together. Step 3 is a commitment expressed in community prayer, public witness to our commitment. There's very little action, but Bill says at the bottom of page 63 and at the top of page 64, you may have a big experience with step 3, but it won't last unless you immediately go to step 4. So also take a look at step 4 in the 12 and 12, the AA 12 and 12. Bill has a very different model. He wrote it in 1953 in contrast to writing the big book in 1939. So he had 15 years of additional sobriety or so. And we'll talk about both the big book and the 12 and 12 next week. If you want additional resources, as I said, my website and or the YouTube will unpack the steps broader and deeper than I have so far. Thank you.